Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the morning meeting. Dan, Sean, and I are here. Big breaking news, of course, overnight, the death of the Pope. We'll talk about that briefly, but we have lots of other stuff to get to. And as you know, this episode, as all, is based on the network television news division's morning meetings, in which they run through the day and kick things around after the day book. And then the surprise O. Henry twist for you is we'll take your questions. So if you want to get in on the conversation and you're here on the two-way platform, please raise your hand. As always, we'd ask peace, love, and understanding. We'd ask that you show the presumption of grace to all on this day in particular, in memory of the Pope. And if you want to put smack in the chat, our moderators will do their best to take it out. But please don't do that. Spirited debate, excellent. Sean, you still seem to be on assignment. Tell everybody about the some of the flora behind you.
Yeah, well, apparently I was going to go for the pool again today, but apparently there's a potential of water aerobics, and I wasn't sure that that would have been a distraction from the topics at hand.
We
So
could have made that a topic on its own.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, so Mondays, yeah, 9:30, so it happened right in the middle but the pool's right there, so we may see water aerobics evolve at 9:30. Don't get distracted. We'll
If water
potentially
splashes onto you, we shouldn't,
What's the hay fever? What's the hay fever like down there as compared to the
Oh,
Northeast, where it's the worst?
nothing. This is if I think if you have allergies, it's the place to be.
Okay.
Apparently, palm trees don't carry a lot of pollen.
Everybody should be lucky that I'm not doing the show with no eyes because I did almost gouge both eyes out this weekend because of the hay fever. All right. At the White House today, let's start with the pool. Sean, what is AgriPulse? You have any
You
idea
know,
what
I
AgriPulse
do.
is?
I do. This is a throwback to 3 years as the assistant U.S. trade rep. AgriPulse is a very ag related industry magazine. It covers trade very heavily, and how the U.S. trade representative policies are affecting the industry. But it is something that is very well read by agriculture industry insiders. So it's a
Yeah.
trade heavy, ag heavy
Do they have a
publication.
do they have a big TikTok game?
I don't think so. Back in
Yeah.
the day, TikTok wasn't a thing, so I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
I will say, not the best day to be the pool if you're AgriPulse, because they're unlikely to get a question to the president, because his only event of the day right now is an open press White House Easter egg roll with the First Lady at 10:30 a.m. We'll see if anything gets added, but that's it on the
Well,
president's schedule.
I will say that is one of the great traditions at the White House. When your party's in power, is a lot of fun to take your kids and go and watch them roll Easter eggs right back there on the South Lawn. It's
well,
fun.
listen, as a two-time White House Easter Bunny, I'm going to give a pro tip to anybody who's potentially doing that today at the White House. Go early. That
Yes.
suit
Yeah.
gets very hot and very
Yeah.
gross.
Yeah.
I learned that my first year, didn't make the mistake the second year. You want to get in that bunny suit early, so that the sweat is
Yeah.
minimized.
Where does is the bunny suit like owned by the federal government? Is it rented? Is
No.
it the same suit every year?
Yeah, it's the
Party
same.
City.
Yeah, I'll post a bunch of this. I'll post my photos from back in the Bush era. It was the Bush era that I did it, not the Trump era. And there's a gentleman and his family's been doing it forever. They set up in the East Wing. It's I mean, they've got this thing down to a
But do
science.
they own the suit, or does
They
the
own the
government?
suit. Yeah, he
And
comes in.
it's literally, you're sure it's the same suit today as it's been for decades?
Yeah,
So,
well, I mean, I can't speak to the last couple years,
yeah.
but the guy has been doing it forever. And my understanding is, I don't know that the government is really, especially in the era of Doge, looking to take on bunny suits as
Yeah.
additional
Wouldn't
uh,
think so. Wouldn't think so.
stock.
All right. Again, raise your hand if you want to be in on the conversation. JD Vance and his family continue their government-funded spring break tour now in Italy after the weekend in
No, they're
I
in
mean, in
India.
India after the weekend in Italy. Thank you. Also meeting with Modi, lots of economic and diplomatic stuff. AP has a big preview of the trip, and Modi talked to Elon Musk over the weekend, and they had a good Twitter exchange about that. Cabinet, lots of trade talks, bilateral trade talks this week. It's a big week in Washington for assembling of financial titans and international finance ministers and the like. The annual meeting of is it both the World Bank and the IMF, or just the World Bank? Is it both?
I will say traditionally they
I
don't
was
meet at the same
So
time, but I
This is World Bank, right? Or is this IMF? I should know, but I don't. Anyway, a lot of
He's
people in
China.
Washington this week concerned about the international economic system and again trade negotiations. Congress House is out. Four House Democrats are headed to El Salvador. They do not expect to have a meeting with the world's most famous deportee, but they're going. Supreme Court's hearing arguments on a pretty important Affordable Care Act case today. We're expecting court rulings, maybe not today, but maybe today, a range of federal courts all around the country on some of these immigration issues. And the Boston Marathon is at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, one of America's great traditions. All right, passing of the Pope. Sean, start with you. Just talk about what you think he'll be remembered for, what his legacy will be.
I don't think there's any question that his legacy is going to be. I mean, there's two sides within the church. There's a lot of people who believe he was much more welcoming, and a lot of people who appreciate that. There's a lot of more traditional Catholics, conservative Catholics, that think he took doctrine to a very progressive level, and that will play into the selection of the next pope as well because of his appointees of eligible cardinals that can vote.
Sean, do you think that the next pope will be less progressive than this pope was?
Well, you almost have to be.
Hmm.
And I think that there's at least among, this is kind of like we joke sometimes about the election of the DNC or the RNC. The College of Cardinals is very similar in that it's a very small group of eligible. So you have to be under the age of 80 to vote. A lot of the old school Cardinals are older, so that were appointed by Benedict, who are still around. Uh, Francis did a lot to appoint people to really stack the deck. It's about 50% of the eligible Cardinals were appointed by Francis. And I think that's going to have a big sway, but I think there's a big recognition uh, by a lot of folks in that group that the church doctrine went a little too far. So there's going to be a pull. The question is, can they get around a single candidate, and can that candidate get 2/3? So I wouldn't be surprised to see a very drawn out selection process because there's going to be a back and forth. But I think that where the church is right now, I think you're definitely going to get somebody who's less progressive than Francis. The question is to what degree.
Dan, there's two more beats coming. The death of the Pope will be a big story today. So my first question to you is, will it be the lead story tomorrow?
Well, maybe. I think
I'm just looking for a yes or no, Dan, not a maybe.
yes, it will be
Yes.
because
Okay.
yep.
So then the two other beats are his funeral. Will the president of the United States go to his funeral, Sean?
I don't think so. I
Okay.
think JD will go.
Yeah. And Dan,
I think
when
he
the
will
ha
go.
yeah, you think Trump will
No,
go?
Trump.
Okay. And how long will the selection process, which is in a few weeks, how long will that take? Do you think a long time drawn out?
I don't know because I agree with Sean. It's a question of the Pope's legacy of modernity. The reason that they went with someone more modern was to try to make inroads again in Europe in places where the Catholicism has been declining. Do they continue to try to do that, or do they go back and say we're going with the flock that we have versus the one that we want?
Yeah. To state the obvious, this takes some pressure off the president and his trade team. It takes a lot of pressure off of Pete Hegseth, who would have been the lead story today if not for the
I
passing
just
of the
by the way,
Pope.
just as a quick note, there's something fitting, no matter where you stand on the legacy of the Pope, about him having one final Easter and then passing. It was just, to me, there's something prophetic about the timing of this, and I
Yeah.
just and
Amazing.
I also the idea that JD was able to go have an audience with him and speak with him. I think I got to be honest with you. I think that's got to be particularly personally moving, to spend some time with him, to see him, and know that you were among the last people on earth to see him before
He will
he
never.
passed.
I feel confident saying JD will never forget it. It'll be something that stays with him for the rest of his life. All right. As I said, the Hegseth story would have been the lead. A number of things fell on the head of the Secretary of Defense yesterday on Easter. First, a New York Times story, 103, reporting from multiple sources that Hegseth had a second signal chat that included his wife and his brother and his personal lawyer, on which he shared sensitive information about the Yemen strikes. That story was quickly matched by many other news organizations suggesting there are people who have the information who want to harm the Secretary of Defense. Duh. Okay. Then uh, I was hearing from lots of people. Then there was a Politico story from a guest column from the former White House or Trump administration spokesperson, communication strategist who had recently left the administration. Some say he was fired, some say he quit. Sean, tell us about that guy. Is he a MAGA or not MAGA?
So John Elliott is very MAGA. He had served as in the first Trump administration as the Assistant Secretary for Veterans Affairs, as the spokesman for Assistant Secretary of VA for Public Affairs, and as the top spokesman on the National Security Council for Trump. Very, very MAGA. He's a former Marine, openly gay, wrote a book about Biden betrayal. I mean, like he is full in on the agenda. I will say this without revealing some data that I mean, uh, John was not exactly happy with how things unfolded with his particular position, um, and how Sean Parnell came in, and some of the things that John. I mean, so if you read that op-ed, understand that I don't want to betray any personal trust here, but I will just say that there's a little, not a little, there's a lot more to that scenario.
Yeah.
He is personally pissed off about how things were handled, some personal slights to him, promises that were made or commitments that he feels were made to him that weren't followed up. So there's a little bit of bitterness there.
No doubt about it. And anyone who's defending the secretary is going to tell you that on background or off the record. At the same time, it's an extraordinary opinion piece in which I don't remember anything quite comparable to this, in which someone who is full MAGA, regardless of the circumstances of his departure, says Hexeth basically should go and will probably go. And I was hearing,
and you notice how he tried to, if you read that thing, you'll notice he tried to thread that needle so well, which was, I love President Trump. I love President Trump. Here's my hit against Hexeth. I love Trump. I love Trump. So it was sort of like, I'm trying to be your friend by helping you.
Correct. Well said. So I was hearing from people yesterday, a lot of mostly unbidden, saying Hexeth is gone. That all the stuff we talked about this last week, kind of the still mystery around the firing of some top aides and the reassignment of another, still not explained. Those three top aides spoke out very aggressively over the weekend, saying that they were treated unfairly. There's possibility of legal action that will be pursued, and some suspicion that some of those fired people were also a source of the story in the New York Times matched elsewhere. I don't know if that's true or not. So I thought there was a good possibility that the deputy Pentagon secretary was going to move to the top slot and that Hegseth was gone. And then, not just the death of the Pope distracting, but a full court press. Chuck Schumer, if he really wants Hegseth gone, made a mistake by putting on social media that Hegseth must be fired. It's the very last thing that would cause Donald Trump to fire Hegseth. In fact, the opposite is true. Here is Charlie Kirk, 106, very influential, of course, in Trump circles, joining the chorus of folks saying that this is all not because of Hegseth's failures in the job, but because he's doing a great job, and that the people who want him gone are the neocons, the warmongers, and the liberal media, and that's why this is happening. Number 105, please. The second Charlie Kirk tweet says, when the DNC says Hegseth needs to go, Kirk, speaking the quiet part out loud, says that's exactly why Pete must stay. And here is Caroline Levitt, 107, in no uncertain terms, mirroring Tom Cotton's tweet, mirroring White House statements over the weekend, saying everybody is for Pete Hegseth staying in his job. 107, please.
The president stands strongly behind Secretary Hegseth, who is doing a phenomenal job leading the Pentagon. And this is what happens when the entire Pentagon is working against you and working against the monumental change that you are trying to implement. Secretary Hegseth was nominated for this position because he is standing up for the war fighter, the men and women in uniform who are putting their lives on the line to protect our country and our homeland. And unfortunately, there have been people at that building who don't like the change the secretary is trying to bring, so they are leaking and they are lying to the mainstream media. We've seen this game played before. The secretary is doing a tremendous job, and the president stands strongly behind him.
Dan, even before the cavalcade of stories from the weekend, I was told, and I said it on the show on Friday, that I thought from my sources that we were headed towards a change at the Pentagon and the NSC, or both, or the NSC or both. Where do you think Hegseth stands now in terms of his hold on the job?
I just think they're digging in because Democrats and the media are Democrats saying he should go. The media, it's the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post reporting the stories. So the knee jerk is to circle the wagons. But I mean, you just step back and read this. There was a concern going in to his nomination that his management track record was terrible. He admitted that he had made some mistakes and that he was going to stop drinking and that some of his fiscal management wasn't great. But you don't see people from the inside coming out even anonymously to defend the guy. He hasn't said anything. So he hasn't denied that the second signal chat to his wife, at least one of the lawyers, I believe, is a lawyer in the Pentagon now. Not that he would need to have this information, but at least you could argue he's in the Pentagon. But I mean, as a Democrat, if they keep defending this guy, I think there will be more stories about him. And it's almost like they're just making it worse for themselves.
And in the op-ed piece that the former spokesman wrote, he said he hears there are more stories coming. Sean.
Yeah, so I will just say a couple things. First of all, to Dan's point on the story, again, without betraying any personal trust, Tim Parlatore is a Navy JAG officer, an 05, who is serving on the Secretary's staff.
Sorry,
so,
this is his personal lawyer, but you're pointing out wears other hats as well.
Yeah. So and his brother also works at the Pentagon. Now, I just say, so the New York Times conveniently downplays both of those facts in the story, that he is on the Secretary's staff. So this idea that it said something to the effect of, it's unclear why he needs to be in this chat. Well, that's not your business to know at the New York Times. Pete he's a trusted aide to him. He's in the military. He is a JAG officer, and who Pete wants to have a small chat with is not really subject to the New York Times' decision-making process. That being said, the bigger question that you're asking, I personally think that Pete, for the reason that Charlie Kirk enumerated, is in very strong ground right now. When Caroline came out and said what she did, it was only after, I will assume, I've not talked to Caroline about this, but you don't say something like that without talking to Donald Trump first, right? So there's no way having been in this position, when you come out and say, I haven't had a chance to talk to the president about that, or he remains confident, that's sort of your tepid, like you're skating on some
nothing tepid about what she said this morning.
Right. And so she was very clear. I know from my brief conversation with the president the other day about national security issues, he's very, very bullish on the job that Pete is doing. He feels great about the recruiting numbers, where the military stands right now under Pete's leadership. So I believe, if anything, that these stories probably embolden him, make him stronger, and for exactly the reasons that Charlie pushed back on the Dem aides, whether it's Schumer or Politico or the New York Times. You're actually helping Pete when you do that.
It is hard to lead a building, though, when a lot of it appears to be against him. Unless you're going to blow out the entire military leadership, good luck with that.
Well, remember, the difference, Dan, is that now, Chairman Kaine, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was personally selected by Trump. He's got a set of service secretaries around him. He's got a DepSec, Feinberg, this is a very different structure than either Mattis or Esper had. He has the support system, at least within the appointees. Now, he does need to build out some staff that's loyal and understands the building and can navigate it. I mean, the Pentagon and the State Department are almost like their own countries, how they operate. So I think that that's going to be important, but he does have some very good people around him.
Sean, I agree with everything you said, but I want to emphasize the point Dan was making. Not all of his enemies are Chuck Schumer and the liberal media. He has some very MAGA people who are opposed to him and don't think he should continue in the job.
Fair enough. But,
so he's going to figure out how to navigate that.
Fair enough. But I think that from as long as you have the president at the top, you're in a very strong position. I've seen it both ways, where you have the staff trying to say, Mr. President, they're really good, keep them in there. And I would much rather have the president with me and worry about some of the ankle biters than the other way.
And he's got to worry about these three guys who were fired, whose careers are potentially ruined now or substantially set back. How they're being handled is something to continue to watch. And we highlighted that for you last week. But those three guys are pissed off, and they are not going quietly, I do not believe. Okay.
I'll tell you, I've seen the president react to this as well. They better be like, when something bad happens, the president, you saw how his chief of staff is being reassigned, right? And I think the president, knowing in many cases, says, hey, find them a soft landing so they don't get pissed off. If these three guys who've been with him since his time at Concerns Veterans for America are pissed about, to your point, how they're being handled, I'd be worried about that little ticking bomb going off.
Yes, 100%. I'll keep an eye on it. All right. As I said, there's a bunch of bilateral conversations going on within the trade group. It continues to be questions about the strategy. Gold is at an all-time high point. The dollar continues to be down in ways that are troubling to people. China this morning said people better not make bilateral deals with the United States that are an attempt to hurt China because China won't stand for that. Dan, just 80,000 feet or whatever elevation you'd like, where do you think we are on tariffs right now?
It's still a mess. I think in addition to what you just said, it's being reported that some of these European countries and others want trade deals with us. Like they are eager to do them, but we don't seem to know what it is that we want. And so I think the longer this drags on, the worse it is. And I actually think the India stuff is the most fascinating because India is a military and economic strategic partner against China. But India wants stuff from us. And they are the worst non-tariff barrier offenders for a lot of IP-intensive sectors. And so I will be very curious as we try to cut a deal with India for multiple reasons. What do we give the Indians and what do we give up? And I think the question really more and more is, who is the first country to cut a deal? Because it better be a really good deal. Because if it's not, everyone else is going to rush for, kind of a crappy deal to get out of the headlines.
It'll be Japan, UK, or India.
I will tell you this, from 3 years of negotiating trade deals, and I mean, sitting in the room while they were done, India and Brazil and Japan are probably the three toughest countries when it comes to giving in anything. I think they will say a lot of things, but we sat around and India plays this developing country story better than any country outside of China. I just have a hard time believing that. I think they will say the right things. Modi and Vance will have a great meeting. It'll look great for Mrs. Vance because this is obviously very important to her and very symbolic. But I will say, I think they will talk a good game and it'll be a lot of fluff. I mean, India just does not want to give.
Trump will call them killers. They're killers in these trade talks. All right. Kilmar, Abrego, Garcia. Chris Van Hollen ended up, I think, doing all 5 shows, although not in studio, which, as Sean correctly points out, does not make it an authentic full Ginsburg. But he was out and about, and he continued to play down the background of this gentleman. And a big debate within the Democratic Party as to whether this is the hill they should die on. Gavin Newsom getting pushback from some of the Democrats on the Sunday shows for suggesting, no, we shouldn't be focused on this guy. We should be focused on what Democrats say they're going to focus on this week, which is quality of life and economics. You can put that back up. So here is the gentleman from Hawaii who's said to be potential successor for Dick Durbin in the number 2 leadership slot if Durbin doesn't run again. Treating due process and immigration issue is morally and strategically bankrupt. It doesn't mean we stop talking about Trump ruining the economy, but my goodness, a competent movement can make 2 points at once. Definitely true that the competent movement can make 2 points at once. Let's try. We still don't have any indication that this gentleman's going to be brought home. As I said earlier, 4 Democratic House members are headed to El Salvador today. Big controversy over the weekend about tattoos. The left seems to think that the White House tried to.
Can I just wait? I got to tell you, the thing that's interesting to me on those trips before we get into the tattoo story is James Comer sent out this. He's the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, and he said, I don't want to approve because the chairman has to sign off on official travel of a relevant committee. And I will be honest with you. I joked with him in all seriousness. I said, respectfully, I disagree with you. Let them go.
Yeah.
Because I'm being serious on this. If I watched Chris Van Hollen, who is meaning he's got a bigger staff. He's a senator. He went through this whole thing. And I'm sitting there as a House member going, do I really want to, that's a high wire act to pull off. And Van Hollen, I think, failed politically. So if you're a House member and you think you're going to go down and pull off a PR stunt at this prison or try to meet, I got to think to it. You are risking a lot, putting a lot on the line. And I think it's a dumb move.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's very risky. Anyway, Dan, just let me quickly on the tattoos. Blue Twitter seems to think that the White House was trying to pull a fast one by annotating a photo of the gentleman's knuckles with MS-13. The White House was not trying to pull a fast one. They weren't claiming those letters were actually written as part of his tattoos. They were simply annotating it so people could understand their claim that the symbols on his fingers represented the letters MS-13. Meanwhile, blue Twitter or red Twitter is posting, this is 109, reposting lots of pictures that Kilmar Abrego Garcia's wife has posted, where she regularly seems to put hearts over his knuckles, okay? Which would lead some to believe that she doesn't want people to see the tattoos. Now, I don't know what's real and what's not on these photos, but these seem to be real photos based on where they've been posted. So, Dan, where is your party currently on this matter?
I would not get into an argument about tattoos on knuckles. I think the party's best argument on this is sticking to the due process. He was not supposed to be deported to an El Salvadorian prison. Full stop. They need to just stick to that. Because there's two things I find interesting coming out of the weekend. One, there is no data that says this is a terrible move for Democrats or a great move for Trump. I have not seen Trump's poll numbers continue to decline. I haven't seen any material movement, net positive on immigration. He's positive on it, but there hasn't been a, 10, 15 point jump for him. So there's no data saying this is a winning issue. I will say anecdotally, people that I know that think the DEI stuff is outrageous, that are totally with Trump on a lot of stuff, do not look at this as a black and white the way we do or X does. And I find it interesting that Joe Rogan again talked about this issue, saying, if a different administration comes into power, it's Garcia today, it could be somebody else on some other issue tomorrow. He is queasy about it. I know we keep saying it's terrible politics, and I understand why one could think that. I'm not so sure this is. I'm just not so sure. It's not great for the Democratic Party. I don't think it's terrible for it. And I don't think it's great for Trump. It's the only issue they have right now to play. Every other issue, trend lines are bad, and they're moving deeper and deeper underwater. So they're banging, he's a terrible dude. And he is.
So
Sean.
the thing that I think is funny, to Dan's last point, is that's what's missing from the Democratic argument. And God bless him for doing that. The idea that they want to call him a family man, a Maryland man, like if they were smart, they would do what Dan is saying, which is, I think he's a horrible guy, but he has rights as
Even horrible guys
right. I mean,
deserve
as you
due
guys,
process.
you guys have heard me say, I think that flag burning is despicable, but I will fight for the right of people under the First Amendment to do things which I hate because I love the First Amendment, right? So there are things that I hate that I will defend, not because I like them or condone them, but because I believe so strongly in the First Amendment, right? There are things that we can say. I am not a huge fan. I'm a pro-life person, right? So I'm not a huge fan of the death penalty, but I mean, like there are things in which I can come out and say, hey, I think that this is worse than that, or here's why I believe, because I believe so passionately in this value, that this is why I, am willing to fight for this thing. These guys are bungling this case so poorly. The idea that the woman is covering up, it's not about the tattoos or the whatever. It's about the fact that they are refusing to admit that this guy is an MS-13 gangbanger, right? The bottom line is he allocated in court. The Prince George's County gang unit says in the report that he's a gang member. He made it very clear in his court filings. He was fearful of going back because he is a member. He has it on his knuckles. Like this was done. I mean, the Democrats, and when Chris Van Hollen was on the Sunday shows, and I put this out on social media, the only person who asked him was Shannon Bream. Did you ask him if he was an MS-13 gang member? And what did he say? No. Wait a second. All the things that you got to spend this quality time with him, have little drinks over the thing, and you didn't say, by the way, I'm getting asked by a lot of people, are you an M? And he said, no, I didn't think it was worth asking him. You are going to fight for the rights of a man to be returned to the United States. And you didn't think that was a question that might want to be asked.
But it is not. Look, I'm going to read you the Supreme Court.
No.
In writing, there has been no pushback from the Trump people. Quote, to this day, the government has cited no basis in law for Mr. Garcia's warrantless arrest, his removal to El Salvador, or his confinement in a Salvadorian prison, nor could it. The government remains bound by an immigration judge's 2019 order expressly prohibiting his removal to El Salvador. There has been no pushback in writing, in law. In politics, it's all fun and games. I get it. But to say he's a gangbanger who should have been sent, it is factually not there. If you have proof, put it out there.
Yeah. All right, hold on. Hold
I
on.
think
We got to move on. And again, if you want to get in the conversation, we got one more topic. Please raise your hand.
Wait, can I just tell you? I want to read from the book of common sense. You should ask the question. The idea that he didn't ask it.
Easter was yesterday.
Just to go back to, how do you pronounce John Ulyat's last name? How do you pronounce it? Elliott, John Elliott. So here's Don Jr. Tweeted just moments ago about John Elliott. This guy is not America first. I've been hearing for years that he works his ass off to subvert my father's agenda. That ends today. He's officially exiled from our movement. So the battle lines are drawn, and I'll say to Don Jr., he's not your only problem within MAGA. That guy.
I mean, I will tell you that for a PR guy, where John made a big mistake, and I mean, like going to Politico to air your grievances.
Yeah, people are wondering about that. Why wasn't that in National Review? Why wasn't it, somewhere else? Not
a smart move. Yeah, you don't go to Politico.
Yeah.
It was a big blunder. I mean,
symbolically, but the facts are going to matter here also.
He should have gone to Political Pro, right?
Exactly. Last topic. Two big profiles of the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, one in the Journal, one in Politico. He's going to New Hampshire next week. I don't know that New Hampshire will matter in the nomination fight in 28, but it might. And AOC, a lot of buzz about AOC. We'll come back and talk more in depth about these two. But let's do this as a rapid round and then go to questions. Jan, who is more likely to be the Democratic nominee for president in 2028? J.B. Pritzker and AOC, and why?
J.B. Pritzker, because I don't think AOC will ultimately run.
Sean?
I don't like my choices, but I'll go with JB.
All right. Has anyone but me realized and pointed out that we could have JD versus JB?
I'll give you the JD. I'm not, like I said, I don't believe the JB.
The correct answer is neither of them has very much of a chance of being the nominee.
But you didn't ask if it was C. You said A or B.
Well, right. I know, but I'm saying
that's why I said I don't like my choices.
What I'm saying is you could have the world's most sophisticated calipers to measure the difference in their probabilities, and you still would have trouble discerning.
I agree. I will also just say, Mark, JB is not running so far on substance with his progressive stuff. It's more attacking like Trump is Hitler and democracy. AOC is not necessarily going there. She is much more substantive focused.
I got to say, I don't understand, except for the fact that he can self-fund. I don't understand the basis of his candidacy.
Because he's speaking up when others won't. And I think right now that's it.
Yeah, they're all speaking up.
Not like him.
One more thing, and then we'll go to your questions. My friend David Burrell, meet me at camera one. David, we should really do a focus group this week if we can on the Abrego Garcia thing. So let's put that together because I'd love to have some qualitative on what people are thinking. All right, here we go. Let's go to your questions. As always, tell us where you are, what's on your mind after you unmute. Daryl.
Yeah,
that's how we say it in New York. Daryl, welcome in. Where are you? And apparently Hegseth is on your mind.
Yeah, Philadelphia. I live outside of Philadelphia. I've been on the program a handful of times. Not really. I've never been a fan of Hegseth. In fact, when Trump announced him, I was like, what? The guy who hit somebody with an axe on Fox News? If anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about, he threw an axe and missed the target, hit somebody.
the viewers of this program are well aware.
All right, good.
All right. And Dara, how many times have you voted for? Did you remind folks how many times you voted for Donald Trump in the general election?
3 times.
Yeah. Okay. So why does he have to go now?
This guy, he lacks a lot of confidence. Like I can just feel it from him, and that's why they're so aggressive. Any kind of criticism of this guy, and he comes out like 1,000% energy, trying to no, this is the way it has to be. President Trump, I support him. Like this guy's a joke. He's never run anything of any substance in his life. Not even just mentioning any of the personal life problems, which are significant. I have no idea why this guy got chosen other than the central casting thing. Like he looks good on TV, but I think he's so cringe. Every time I see him talk, time I see him involved in the news, I'm just like, oh God, such unforced errors. Why this guy was chosen, I have no idea.
All right, Daryl, hold on. Let's let Sean and then Dan comment. Sean, or ask you a question, either way.
Yeah, I mean, just out of curiosity, Daryl, have you ever served in the military?
No.
Okay. I'm just asking because I didn't know. I mean, I think one of Pete's attributes, I mean, the president tried to get him to serve as VA secretary right out of the gate after he won in 2016. We talked to him about being press secretary. I mean, like Pete's been in Trump's orbit for a while, been very loyal. I think he understands the task at hand. Look, I've watched him interact with soldiers and sailors. He is, look, he really has the warfighter ethos. He gets sort of the the what's missing right now in terms of the mentality for a lot of folks who are currently serving, and he is the antithesis of a lot of folks who have served at the highest levels of the Pentagon that sort of keep passing the buck down the road. And I think Trump loves that. I think for a lot of people who have served, the idea of bringing somebody in there that has that focus on war fighting and deterring threats as opposed to DEI training and kicking the can down the road and not focused on what we need, it has been missing. And I think he exemplifies that.
Dan.
Yeah, I'll just say, by the way, the Houthis are still attacking ships. So, I mean, Daryl, does this make you, how do you feel about President Trump right now in a macro sense?
I mean, overall, I'm happy. There are growing things that I'm annoyed by, that I sort of knew I was going to be annoyed by his returning to the presidency. But there are a handful of things that I'm just like, what are they doing? They're just losing all the momentum on some.
What are the things that annoy you?
Other
than Hegseth.
It's not anybody who remembers me ever being on this program is going to know, like, I'm just so annoyed by this Israel policy. Just like Israel's like, we want you guys to jump, and Trump's like, how high do we need to jump for you, Israel? I really hate the focus on that. The tariff.
Wait, hold on. So just to be clear, the other day he according to reports, waved off a direct hit, and I think that's kind of contrary. Netanyahu would like a lot more authority to do stuff, and he hasn't gotten it.
Well, that's true. I'll give him that.
Yeah, but you just said that when he tells them to jump, they jump.
The anti-war part is a good part of Trump. He has a good anti-war instinct because he knows he's going to ruin his presidency if he starts a huge war. But in terms of everything else, it's like whatever Israel wants, they get. And as you know, Hegseth was it seems to, at least in the leaks that came out, he seemed to be kind of pressuring against the attack on Iran. So I'll give him credit for that. But, you mentioned all this like DEI stuff. Like, why does he need to be the one to do that? Like, that can't be done by anybody else that's a little bit more qualified, who's actually like run an organization of any significant size. I mean, the Department of Defense is huge, Sean. Like, come on,
I'm well aware.
This.
All right,
yeah,
Daryl, thank you for coming on. Grateful to you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
And I just ask real quick, since we got Daryl before we let him go. Daryl, we were talking about Abrego. What do you think on the immigration thing? Is that something that you think is going well, or?
I don't understand the fixation on this one guy. I mean, I'm in the camp of get rid of everybody who's here illegally, pretty much. I am disappointed in the pace. Like, I never actually expected them to really round up people because it's really logistically it's impossible. But I would have expected them to do even more. Like, I mean, even in my own personal life, just going around, I see illegal aliens everywhere. Like, and I don't mean to be like, stereotype people, but like, it shouldn't be very hard to round these people up. I don't know what's going on.
All right, Daryl, thank you. Grateful to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Bill, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind today. Thank you for being part of Two Way.
Hey guys, Seattle, Washington, anarchist district of Seattle, Washington, as some would say. I've got a question just for the whole group. So what's the plan? What's the plan with reshoring? I listened to the show mornings and afternoons. We want to bring PPE We want to bring steel back. I don't understand how we would do that without government intervention at basically helping pay for all that. I don't
Yeah.
see it happening at like on a free market
Yeah.
system
Yeah.
without
Dan.
a lot of money doing that.
Yes, sir. Great
Bill, it's a
question.
great question that it's one of the reasons that both people who analyze markets and the economy are scratching their heads, because I think there's two things you would have to do. You would have to make tariffs so high that importing steel becomes costlier than purchasing it domestically. And or you would have to provide some sort of subsidy, whether from tax breaks or whatnot, somewhat the way kind of Boeing and Airbus have backdoor subsidies essentially to compete with each other, to offset what would be the true cost of the product in the open marketplace. And this is where, when you look at not just steel, but textiles, all the different things that Trump talks about wanting to manufacture here, you scratch your head to say to get from here to there would take a decade, and at what cost? Because the price is going to increase because either the tariffs to purchase abroad or the domestic to produce here is going to make goods 30, 40% more expensive. And how do people feel about those kind of the shock cost to the system?
So look, first of all, I think President Trump's got a lot of had already gotten a lot of results, right? So you think about Hyundai, SoftBank, Apple, Taiwan, semiconductors, all of this reshoring is happening. Specifically on the issues of aluminum and PPE and pharma, I argue, and I believe it is kind of what Dan is touching on, there needs to be more of a policy follow-up. You can't just do this through pure tariff alone. There's got to be tax incentives. I don't know that you have to do direct subsidies, but you've got to do things that we declare in our national interest are critical to our survival. I think all of those qualify for that, right? And so there's a policy piece to this that Congress, even on immigration, that Congress needs to get involved in and enact legislation to incentivize that. So a company's not just worried about the next 3 years, but they've got some certainty that they can invest. So it could be R&D subsidies, R&D tax credits, whatever it is, but they've got to do things that incentivize the growth of industries here in the United States that are critical to our national security. That's the piece that I think is missing right now, that I think that they should be touting as well, because as a CEO, I think that would be probably a bigger thing. It's not just, hey, it's cheaper to do it here because of a tariff that another country's imposing, but we need to make it more friendly and more and incentivize it more to build and do business here.
Sean,
Bill,
do you think that could happen? Because that would, to me, it would seem it would have to be bipartisan, and it's going to be about 10 years down the road. And do you think that the current administration and future administrations could make that happen?
So I think, first of all, they have enough votes in Congress right now to do a lot of it. Obviously, some of it you can't do through reconciliation. You'd have to do, and I think you could pull in 6 votes on the Senate side to do certain things. So I think that, and you can codify that in law. I don't see a future administration necessarily undoing it. At least not in the short term. So regardless, I do think you could get some bipartisan support on pharma, on PPE, on steel and aluminum, on critical things. So yeah, I do think you could get that done. I just think it has to be a priority. And frankly, I've been saying this on the immigration front. Republicans need to wake up and realize that obviously the priority right now is get reconciliation done. But after that, you got just shy of 18 months where you can guarantee a Republican House and a Republican Senate, and you better figure out what those 3, 4, 5 things max that you're going to codify in law and get done during this session of Congress.
Yeah. So, Bill, there's a reality, which is it's very challenging for any president to pursue a policy that won't come to fruition on their watch. It's hard, right? Because they're not going to get the credit for it in real time. And I think whatever you think of tariffs in general or how the Trump administration's implemented this, you should give the president and his team credit for saying this is a long-term project, but it must be done. And it taps into what is bipartisan consensus, which is hard to see because of the current nature of our politics is so tribal. Where's their bipartisan consensus? It's against big global international multilateral trade deals, right? You don't hear anybody anymore talking about TPP or GATT or all these other things. So there's bipartisan consensus that international trade deals, particularly that advantage or seen as advantaging China, are not a good idea. Number two, it's believed that it's in our national security interest to have certain industries be strong in the United States. So there's a consensus there. Three, there's consensus that tariffs used correctly are a good thing. Not everybody believes that, but that's pretty strong bipartisan consensus from Elizabeth Warren to Donald Trump that tariffs are a good thing. And finally, there's a belief that America is in long-term economic decline, that it is an intolerable status quo, and that something needs to be done to change that. And tariffs and bringing certain industries back here is seen as, again, bipartisan consensus, both in the country and in Congress and in Washington, as part of the solution to stemming that long-term decline. And I think if you're willing to put aside the tribalism for a minute and say, has this been executed perfectly? No. Is it got some real short-term downsides? Yes. Is it part of, consistent with the consensus about tariffs, America's role in the world, national security? It very much is. And that's why, you're right to be skeptical that these big pieces are going to happen. But that's the goal. And the alternative is to just let it all continue to go offshore and have America manufacture nothing and be incredibly susceptible to supply chain disruptions or global war with China, where China turns everything off all of a sudden.
Mark, the only thing I'll say is I don't think it's that we're in economic decline. It's that manufacturing is in decline.
America itself, in terms of people's belief that their kids and grandkids are going to have the same economic opportunity that they do.
That's
in decline.
I think, more of an AI fear.
But it's also a question of good jobs at good wages, and what can Americans do for a living that allows people to feel confident that their kids and grandkids are going to have a strong standard of living and meaningful work.
Right, but that's not because we manufacture.
It's partly
because Nikes are in Vietnam, but a lot of it is because of the freak out about AI, appropriately so.
Yeah, I agree. It's multi-dimensional, but the AI thing is relatively new, obviously. For decades, this has been felt, and again, we've talked about it. Others have. It's partly cultural, right? There are parts of particularly the industrial Midwest that just miss having those kinds of jobs, but it's also connected to use the Dukakis phrase, good jobs at good wages. Thank you for coming in, sir. Grateful to you for that question, and thank you for getting up early and for being part of 2. Grateful. Yeah. All right, Professor Kenny, welcome in. Thank you for joining.
Ooh.
It's possible that some folks don't know where you are, so please tell them and tell us what's on your mind after you
like the Chesapeake.
Hey, how are you? How's everybody doing? I am back in New Jersey after a week in Clearwater, Florida. Drove down and drove back 1 week.
How long is that drive?
Well, I got Shakespeare in the back. That's my golden. And with the wife shares the driving, but we always have to stop and sleep for a couple hours. So it's about good 24 hours.
Do you sleep in Virginia? Where'd you sleep?
We sleep in North Carolina usually at a rest stop. We sleep in the car.
I always sleep in North Carolina. That should be the bumper sticker. North Carolina, sleep here.
Yeah. So what I wanted to bring up, which I've been wanting to bring up for 8 weeks now, is the war in Ukraine. And maybe I want to point this to, I guess, to all three of you guys, but maybe Sean might be more in tune with this. My boss is a Russian. He's Russia. He's from Russia. And he always, we talk about these issues, and he says that the key to stopping Russia and Putin and everything is oil. And I just want to know, why aren't we doubling down with the Saudis right now and trying to get them to drop their oil prices so that we can get China and India to stop buying oil from Russia, and then that would just totally handicap the Russian economy and Putin and put him right in his place.
Yeah, always a great question. Why don't we exercise more leverage over the Saudis? Because we can't. Sean.
Yeah, I think one, we can't, and B, if we saw what happened, during Trump 1, the Germans didn't seem to care. They continued to buy all their oil and gas through Russia. So we've seen this with Huawei in China. I brought this up before. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the biggest issue that I continue to have with Europe is that they're always looking for the cheapest date and the short-term solution, not the long-term. So, part of that is just the reality of what they're looking for, and it's usually cost related.
So
Yeah,
you don't think I'm sorry, Dan. Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead. Dan.
I don't think we have the levers. I mean, look, the Saudis use oil revenue to fund their government and to basically pay their people. I mean, there's a reason they're trying to diversify their economy through sports and creating a financial, services hub in Riyadh and all the things they're trying to do. I think it's called the 22nd Century Project or something like that, is because they are addicted to oil. They need the revenue. And frankly, they also are the key in the Middle East to the issues with Iran. They hate Iran and what we're trying to do with some of the neighbors. So it's like all of this. It is a complicated world in which George H.W. Bush used to talk about it. I mean, realpolitik. People are your friends and they're not always nice people.
Right, but couldn't we make some kind of deal with the Saudis where we partner with them like militarily, like that we kind of got their back?
We do. That's who's fighting the Houthis.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm talking about like when it comes to Iran and stuff like that.
It is, but I mean, it's a fine line. They don't want a regional war either, because you know who Iran would probably target somewhat? Saudi Arabia. I mean, it's just not that, and what do we give them?
Yeah. Professor, thank you. Thank you for joining. Always glad to have you here. Meldrick, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind, please. Thank you for being part of it.
Sunglasses.
Hi, I'm from Colorado, Trump supporter. I want to talk about this headset thing because, I was in the Marine Corps, got out in 2021, and I'm a contractor for the DoD now. So,
where in Colorado are you? You down in Springs area?
Yep. Yeah. Yep. I wish I had a SecDev like him when I was in. Like, I understand he's got complications and stuff like that, but the motivation and him showing up on the ground with the troops, being motivational and just kind of showing support is something that wasn't there. And we were in a recruiting crisis that was bad. And the neocons and the neolibs solution was to just make everything more open, inclusive, and lower standards. That was always the wrong choice. The answer was to lean into the rough and tough side of the military to get the right people in and attract the right people to stay. And so I think he's doing a great job. I know there's some issues, but that I don't really like. But I'm not.
What are the issues you don't like?
Well, I didn't like the signal. I didn't like the signal thing because I work in cybersecurity. So
yeah.
But I'm not playing the double standard game though. So while I don't like it, I don't want him fired because I'm not playing these double standard games where the other side gets to do whatever they want, nobody gets fired, and we have to like cave immediately. No, not doing that.
Sean.
So that's my stance.
Yep, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, to Meldrick, first of all, thanks for your service, Meldrick. I appreciate you continuing to fight the fight. I will say that, look, both sides have issues, right? So you had Secretary Austin disappear off the grid for 7 days. He didn't face any repercussions. I don't think it makes it right. One side does something but I agree with you. The question is, are they making the institution better? When you look at morale, when you look at recruiting, when you look at our focus on war fighting, say what you will about Pete. Obviously, no one's perfect, but at the end of the day, our priorities are in order right now. Our recruiting is up, our warfighting morale is up, our focus on shipbuilding and preparedness against threats that we might face is, I think, in a much better place. So net, again, this is where I think we have the focus we need to deter the threats that we'll face, and that works for me.
Dan.
Everyone keeps mentioning this, and I'm saying this, and it's an honest question. Is there data that morale is up? I mean, I know it's being said, but by the administration,
there has been some.
Okay.
Anecdotally, I could tell you, I feel, I work on a base, and I feel it, but I don't have, data on that.
Okay. So Meldrick, absent the signal issues, there's now two. The did you read what was in the op-ed, kind of these allegations of the building being a complete mess? And does that bother you? Do you think it's the price of business to have the leadership that you do like? How do you feel about the allegations by people who served that behind the curtain, it's a mess?
I think if you're going to make major change at the Pentagon, that there's going to be people who come out against you, and there's going to be chaos. I understand. I'm not one who's opposed to chaos. Like, I understand when you make major change, things are going to get a little bit dicey, but that's the line you have to walk, or else we're going to keep the same people. And I don't like how people are using their knowledge of him and or what the situation is to like hang it over his head so they can't be fired or anything like that. Or as soon as they're fired, they come out and like rail against him like as a weapon. Like, you come on, there's something bigger than you and your career and your. Well, I understand they care about the careers, but like the mission and the team, like I don't understand how they can go to the Pentagon and DC and just kind of throw that idea of, hey, handle it behind closed doors.
Magic, real quick, how do you feel about the deportation of Abrego Garcia?
I don't care about it. I mean, I'm glad he's deported, whether it's El Salvador or somewhere else. The procedural stuff around it, when he was an illegal immigrant with the deportation order and all that stuff with the crisis we have at the border, doesn't bother me. What
would you say to Americans who say due process is important in every case, regardless of who the person is?
I would ask them, what due process are they talking about? I would say we give them the same due process that they had coming in than they do going out, which was almost none. That's what I would say, because the crisis is so bad. I don't think people understand. 15 million people unvetted. We have Al Qaeda, ISIS. This is all public available. I'm not speaking out of term. The cartels that set up networks here. It's really bad. I don't think people understand the degree to how bad it is.
So would you say if someone's here illegally and the government brands them as a gang member, you'd be for no due process, just take them out, send them wherever, or some limited due process?
Right. From my understanding, they could file a habeas corpus
in
court.
If you could make the policy, is there? I guess let me ask it this way: is there anything the Trump administration could do in terms of deporting someone illegally that would raise concerns for you about due process or rights, or not?
Unfortunately, not. And if you asked me 5 years ago, I would have said yes. But the crisis is so bad that I'm sorry, it's just not there for me. I'm just being brutally honest. You
speak for tens of millions, but not everybody. But you do speak for tens of millions. Thank you for joining and for sharing all that with us.
I just, Mark, since your last question, I'll make this quick. But I do think it's interesting. You had a President Biden who, when the Supreme Court ruled that his student loan, quote unquote, forgiveness was not constitutional, and he went ahead and tried to do it anyway. None of these people on the left had a problem with following the Constitution or claiming that there's a constitutional crisis because he was going against the court. When these people were allowed to come into the country illegally, no one had a problem. I mean, like, I get a kick out of all these folks who are suddenly worried about due process and the Constitution and everything. For 4 years, they sat silent and didn't worry about the Constitution. They didn't worry about due process. They didn't have an issue with constitutional crises. And suddenly now it's, the hill to die on. So,
but the Biden administration kept tweaking the pot. I mean, that's how they kept trying to get around it. They didn't just ram it down and say, we're not changing anything and like, let us do Sharpies on X.
And I'll say there are tens of millions, Sean, who would say, why aren't you all concerned now if you were concerned back then, right? It works both ways. And
I think there's a difference. I think I am concerned about due process, but I do think that when you are in the country illegally, a court has adjudicated that you are a gang member. Right. It's an Article 2 court. I mean,
but as you know, the vast majority of rhetoric from the White House and the White House's supporters is not fighting it out on the merits there. The vast majority is this is a bad guy, and Democrats are fools to defend a bad guy. So I'm for accountability in both. And I'll say I have infinite patience, but I'm a little sick of people saying Lloyd Austin was a bad Secretary of Defense, so Pete Austin can do whatever. Pete Hegseth can do whatever he wants. Like, I don't understand that argument. That's not a principled argument for anything. Sean, what do you have on your show tonight?
We're actually going back to back with Mulvaney and Kevin Hassett today on tariffs and the economy. So
awesome.
I think we're excited.
Awesome. Two ways left today, 5 o'clock Eastern time, Meghan McCain, her special guest, Christine Rosen. For those of you who don't know Christine, she's an incredible thinker and very funny. And I'm looking forward to this episode quite a bit. So 5 o'clock today, Eastern Time, Megan McCain's Happy Hour. Christine Rosen, commentary superstar, joins Megan. And then at 6 o'clock, I will be back with Two Way Tonight with my guest, Alex Eisenstadt, who is one of the best political reporters on earth. And he and I will run through today's news. Of course, as always, be eager to hear your thoughts. So please join us for that as well. Quickly put up the Biden photo. I know we're over time, but everybody wants everybody wants this. This is a Biden photo, family photo that was tweeted out over the weekend. I don't know if you can zoom into the former president. Just yes or no, Sean, is President Biden really in that photo, or is that photoshopped? Yeah, photoshopped, yes or no?
I don't know. I mean, awkward. I don't know. I would have it. It doesn't look real because of the pose. I mean, is he kneeling? I don't get it.
Okay.
It doesn't. But
Yeah.
I just at some point I'm just over it.
Yeah, and it's hard to imagine the trajectory of his arm that leads to the hand being there. But Dan, Photoshop, yes or no?
I think it's Photoshopped. I can't believe I'm saying this. I do, and as you say, the hand around the gentleman to his right does not look like a natural arm given where he is.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm saying this. I do think it's Photoshopped, and if it's true, what are they doing?
But also, like, it's just that's a bad, like, you picked a bad photo to Photoshop. He's squinting, his arms in the weird place. Like, I don't know why he's not, his body's, it was a bad Photoshop.
Yeah, just go widen back out again. They're all seated, right?
Yeah,
That's why
they're
I'm
on
saying
stairs. So
Yeah.
I don't.
That's why I'm saying he doesn't, it doesn't, it's not to scale.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, if you were bent over, you'd be bent at the waist. You'd be more.
I'd say everything visual suggests just Photoshop, but I refuse to believe they could be that dumb. So
Oh, Mark, you think too
oh,
highly.
young Mark.
I say that in honor of the memory of the Pope. Thank you all for watching. Sorry we ran a little bit over. The three of us will be back in 23 hours, give or take, and I'll see you at 6 tonight. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye-bye.